Hi, everyone. Um, sorry. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to welcome you to Resources for Writers, workshop organized by the community at Lewis Place as part of the Artist Publishing Practicum. Today is March 23rd, 2025. It is the second day of the practicum. And for those who are just now joining us live, a reminder that all sessions today are recorded. I also want to remind you that you can access live open captions by toggling captions at the bottom of your screen. You can also view a full transcript for the day by clicking the arrow next to captions and choosing transcript. The next workshop, the next session is co-led by myself, Naima Lowe, coordinator at Lewis Place, and Quincy Flowers, a co-founder at Lewis Place. And if you have questions for us, we have a short presentation. We have some reflections and writing prompts. Actually, we're going to begin with a reading. We have some reflections and writing prompts, and then we have a presentation. We're going to put our slides and resources in the chat, and we will have a little bit of time for questions. So if you have questions, you can pose those in the chat, and Genevieve and Jessica will collect them. We're very happy to respond the best we can. And I'll say that your questions can relate to the materials that we're sharing now. We may also be able to help with some of the questions that have come up that are more general or that are maybe connected to some of the ideas that emerged in other presentations. So we look forward to having a little bit of time to chat at the end. And I'm going to hand it over to Naima, I think, is going to
Yeah.
begin.
Yes, I am going to start us off with kind of an at Lewis Place classic, which is reading aloud to you. And reading aloud together. That's something that we do actually a fair amount. I love it. If you don't do it every day of your life, I highly recommend it. To just get together on Zoom with your friends, off Zoom, whatever, and read aloud. Um, the piece that I'm going to share, and I'm going to share my screen and also drop it in the chat. Make sure I have the right thing up. Okay, great. Not sharing sound. Okay, great. Um, it is from this text called Create Dangerously by Edwidge Danticat. It's a beautiful collection of essays um, from, I think, 2011. Um, and and this is the first essay that sort of frames it. It's also called Create Dangerously. And the subtitle is An Immigrant Writer at Work. And I'm going to read sort of from the middle section of the essay. The way it starts is Edwidge Danticat, who is Haitian American, sort of tells this story of sort of witnessing the executions of some political dissidents um, in Haiti, and how this experience during um, the presidency of Duvalier, and she kind of talks about this experience being really formative in terms of her thinking as a writer, some of the ways that people in her community kind of responded and pushed back to this experience, what the community that she was living in until she was about 12 and left Haiti for the United States, how people were sort of shaped by the experience of witnessing um, these executions. Um, so I'm going to, let me also, I'm going to have us read along. I mean, I'll move along as I go. Let me also put this in the chats in case you want to read at your own pace, starting on page 5. Hold on a sec. Sorry, I'm a little super screened. I love that text too. Hi, Anna Joy. Anna Joy was one of my first writing teachers who didn't make me feel stupid when I was an undergrad. Really glad to see you're here. Um, okay. All artists, writers among them, have several stories. One might call them creation myths. They haunt and obsess them. This is one of mine. I don't even remember when I first heard about it. I feel as though I have always known it, having filled in the curiosity-driven details through photographs, newspaper, magazine articles, books, and films as I have gotten older. Like many a creation myth, aside from its heartrending clash of life and death, homeland and exile, the execution of Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin involves a disobeyed directive from a higher authority and a brutal punishment as a result. If we think back to the biggest creation myth of all, the world's very first people, Adam and Eve disobeyed the superior being that fashioned them out of chaos, defying God's order not to eat what must have been the world's most desirable apple. Adam and Eve were then banished from Eden, resulting in everything from our having to punch a clock to spending many long, painful hours giving birth. The order given to Adam and Eve was not to eat the apple. Their ultimate punishment was banishment, exile from paradise. We, the storytellers of the world, ought to be more grateful than most that banishment rather than execution was chosen for Adam and Eve. For had they been executed, they would never have been, there would never have been another story told, no stories to pass on. In his play Caligula, Albert Camus, from whom I borrow part of the title of this essay, has Caligula, the third Roman emperor, declare that it doesn't matter whether one is exiled or executed, but it is much more important that Caligula has the power to choose. Even before they were executed, Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin had already been exiled. As young men, they had fled Haiti with their parents from Papa Doc de Valier when Papa Doc de Valier had come to power in 1957 and had immediately targeted for arrest all his detractors and resistors in the city of poets and elsewhere. Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin had made new lives for themselves, becoming productive young immigrants in the United States. In addition to his army and finance experience, Louis Drouin was said to have been a good writer and the communications director of JOAN Haiti. In the United States, he contributed to a Haitian political journal called Lambi. Marcel Numa was from a family of writers. One of his male relatives, Nomo Numa, had adapted the 17th century French playwright Pierre Corneille's Le Cid, placing it in a Haitian setting. Many of the young men Numa and Drouin joined with to form Jeu Haiti had fathers killed by Papa Doc de Valier and had returned, Le Cid and Hamlet-like, to revenge them. Like most creation myths, this one too exists beyond the scope of my own life, yet it still feels present, even urgent. Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin were patriots who died so that other Haitians could live. They were also immigrants like me. Yet they had abandoned comfortable lives in the United States and sacrificed themselves for the homeland. One of the first things the despot de Valier tried to take away from them was the mythic element of their stories. In the propaganda preceding their execution, he labeled them not Haitian, but foreign rebels, good-for-nothing blancs. At the time of the execution of Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin, my recently married 29-year-old parents lived in Haiti in a neighborhood called Bel Air, about a 30-minute walk from the cemetery. Bel Air had a government-sponsored community center, a centre d'études, where young men and women, but mostly young men, went to study in the evenings, especially if they had no electricity at home. Some of these young people, not my parents, but young people who studied at the center, belonged to a book club, a reading group sponsored by the Alliances Françaises, the French Institute. The book group was called Le Club des Bons Hommes, or the Good Humor Club. At the time, Le Club des Bons Hommes was reading Camus' play Caligula with an eye to possibly staging it. In Camus' version of Caligula's life, when Caligula's sister, who is also his lover, dies, Caligula unleashes his rage and slowly unravels. In a preface to an English translation of the play, Camus wrote, "I look in vain for philosophy in these 4 acts. I have little regard for an art that deliberately aims to shock because it is unable to convince." After the executions of Marcel Numa and Louis Drouin, as the images of their deaths played over and over in cinemas and on state-run television, the young men and women of the Club de Bonhomie, among the rest of Haiti, desperately needed art that could convince. They needed art that could convince them that they would not die the same way Numa and Drouin did. They needed to be convinced that words could still be spoken, that stories could still be told and passed on. So as my father used to tell it, these young people donned white sheets as togas and they tried to stage Camus' play quietly, quietly in many of their houses, where they whispered lines like, "Execution relieves and liberates. It is a universal tonic, just in precept as in practice. A man dies because he is guilty. A man is guilty because he is one of Caligula's subjects. Ergo, all men are guilty and shall die. It is only a matter of time and patience." The legend of the underground staging of this and other plays, clandestine readings of pieces of literature, was so strong that years after Papa Doc de Valier died, every time there was a political murder in Bel Air, one of the young aspiring intellectuals in the neighborhood where I spent the first 12 years of my life might inevitably say that someone should put on a play. And because the uncle who raised me while my parents were in New York for 2/3 of the first 12 years of my life, because that uncle was a minister in Bel Air and had a church and school with some available space, occasionally some of these plays were read and staged quietly, quietly in the backyard of his church. There were many recurrences of this story throughout the country. Book and theater clubs secretly cherishing some potentially subversive piece of literature, families burying, if not burning, their entire libraries, books that might seem innocent but could easily betray them, novels with the wrong titles, treatises with the right titles and intentions, strings of words that uttered, written, or read could cause a person's death. Sometimes these words were written by Haitian writers like Marie Vauchevet and René Desmartres, among others. Other times they were written by foreign or blonde writers, writers like Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, or Albert Camus, who were untouchable because they were either not Haitian or already long dead. The fact that death prevented one from being banished, unlike, say, the English novelist Graham Greene, who was banned from Haiti after writing The Comedians, made the classic writers all the more appealing. Unlike the country's own citizens, these writers could neither be tortured or murdered themselves, nor cause their family members to be tortured or murdered. And no matter how hard he tried, Papa Doc de Valier could not make their words go away. Their maxims and phrases would keep coming back, buried deep in memories by the rote recitation techniques that the Haitian school system had taught so well. Because these writers who were still in Haiti, not yet exiled or killed, could not freely perform or print their own words outright, many of them turned or returned to the Greeks. When it was a crime to pick up a bloodied body on the street, Haitian writers introduced Haitian readers to Sophocles' Oedipus Rex and Antigone, which had been rewritten in Creole and placed in Haitian settings by the playwright Franck Fouché and the poet Félix Morisot-Leroy. This is where these writers placed their bets, striking a dangerous balance between silence and art. How do writers and readers find each other under such dangerous circumstance? Reading, like writing, under these conditions is disobedience to a directive in which the reader, our Eve, already knows the possible consequences of eating that apple, but takes a bold bite anyway. How does the reader find the courage to take this bite, open that book, after an arrest, an execution? Of course, he or she may find it in the power of the hushed chorus of other readers, but he can also find it in the writer's courage in having stepped forward and having written or rewritten in the first place. Create dangerously for people who read dangerously. This is what I've always thought it meant to be a writer. Writing, knowing in part that no matter how trivial your words may seem, someday, somewhere, someone may risk his or her life to read them. Coming from where I come from, with the history I have, having spent the first 12 years of my life under both dictatorships of Papa Doc and his son, Jean-Claude, this is what I've always seen as the unifying principle among all writers. This is what, among other things, might join Albert Camus and Sophocles to Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Osip Mandelstam, and Ralph Waldo Emerson to Ralph Waldo Ellison. Somewhere, if not now, then maybe years in the future, a future that we may have yet to dream of, someone may risk his or her life to read us. Somewhere, if not now, then maybe years in the future, we may also save someone's life or mind because they have given us a passport, making us honorary citizens of their culture. This is why when I wrote a book called The Dew Breaker, a book about Choquette Lozé, or a Duvalier era torturer, a book that is partly set in the period following the Numa and Dorian executions, I use an epigraph from a poem by Osip Mandelstam, who famously said, "Only in Russia is poetry respected. It gets people killed." Maybe this is the beginning of madness. The quotation I used is this: maybe this is the beginning of madness. Forgive me for what I'm saying. Read it quietly, quietly. I'm gonna stop there. I highly recommend reading the rest of that essay as well as the book as a whole. It is wonderful, and I feel very, well, it's always very prescient. But I'm feeling grateful to have like recalled and remembered it from my teaching a long time ago and this weekend, for this weekend. And I think actually let's go ahead and can we share the presentation because that has my yeah. There's many reasons that I love this text. The invocation to create dangerously is so potent, so powerful. And what I love about what Dante kind of formulates for us is obvious. I mean, the imperative to think of a future, to imagine a future where your work is necessary is so critical. It's such um, a radical lens. It's such a Black feminist lens. But I also really particularly like how she frames this. She calls it both she names it variously as like an immigrant lens, a nomad lens, a traveler lens, of the critical importance of sort of imagining yourself of and working towards and with um, cultures actually that aren't your own, and writing towards and thinking broadly, where she kind of, I think, eschews the idea of the sort of absolute. She's very clear about herself as a Haitian and a Haitian American. She, very, very fundamental, and also talks about why it was important that those Haitians had frames of reference that weren't just Haitian in that moment. And she names other points in the essay of writers like this Russian writer that she references and others who are sort of triangulating sort of cultural contexts really broadly, where the sense of need is not, and the sense of community is one of critical mythic necessity in the face of domination, as opposed, and in the face of joy, and the face, all sorts of responses, and how thinking about that as like a way of thinking about where your work goes and how it's being received can be powerful and complex and sneaky and all kinds of things at once. And I just think it's like a juicy imperative, that, I don't know, I thought particularly, I know that, we have people zooming in here from all over the world. I know that we are, um, when we're, when I can remember to do the time zones right, a transnational organization. I think that sometimes as Americans, we forget to recognize that we're part of a global community, right? Like, and these are really critical questions. And so with that in mind, and thank you for your patience with the reading and all of that. I want to give us some time to do some writing. And again, this is a ALP classic. We read a text together. We write with it as a sort of central prompt. And so I offer these three possibilities to write from. You're also welcome to write about anything else you want. You're also welcome to go back in and continue reading. The time is yours, but these are the offerings. And also something you can take past this session. So the first is to write your own formative creation mythology. The second is who will find your writing in a moment of crisis or need, and who will they read it to quietly, quietly? And the last is write a brief letter to your past, present, or future dangerous reader. And let's take 10 minutes? That's 6 minutes? 6 to 10 minutes? I know I read longer than I meant to. I'm sorry. I got into it.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I think 6 minutes just so that we're sure that we have time to get through everything and answer folks' questions at the end.
okay.
So it's really just a seed.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do till at yeah, 5 Eastern, 4 Central, so just at the hour.
Ready, you can return. And I hope you'll continue to work with those prompts um, when we're finished, and continue to return to the Dantica text as a resource. Such a beautiful text. So we have organized just a few kind of notes and summaries and questions and considerations and resources to share. The PDF version of the slideshow has been shared in the chat by Naima. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started going through some of the questions that and resources that we would like to offer. So I began with a quote. Literature isn't a thing you do for yourself, but you also don't not do it for yourself. Your soul needs saving too. And I thought it would be helpful to remind us maybe that the creative work we do is work that we do in community, and it also begins and unfolds and passes through our own bodies and minds and spirits, and that as we that when in contexts like this, where we receive so much information about the many different forking paths that are available to us as artists, it can be a little overwhelming, but it can be less overwhelming if you remember that the work at the beginning and end has to pass through your body. You're the one who has to be able to live with it as well, and that returning to yourself as a resource and um, as a kind of check on your own ambitions can be super helpful. I so my suggestion, I'm just going to go ahead and say even though we pulled these materials together as a group, and they also reflect, I would say, that collectively the thinking that we do and have done together at Lewis Place since we started in 2020. The first suggestion is to articulate your vision and define your goals. I suggest beginning by considering your artistic goals, creative goals, process goals, and remembering that those always live and they're always housed within a life. So it's what do I want to make, but also how do I envision that process of making fitting into my days? How does it align with my family? How does it align with my life? How do I want to be transformed by my creative journey? Um, how does my work live in community? How do I want to contribute to my community? What impact? And sometimes it's helpful to think about this in a really tangible way. Do I want to have, who do I want my work to reach? Even thinking how do I think about community in relation to my own practice and you may find that that community includes people who are co-living with you on this planet, maybe in your same neighborhood at this moment. And it may also include those who will inherit your work and who may not encounter it for decades, in which case that might help you identify one set of priorities. If you're writing for your neighbors, that might help you identify a very different set of priorities. So who is this work? Who am I working for? Who do I want my work to reach, and how and when? Also, I think it can be helpful early on to consider whether you have goals that are tied to achievement, both personal measures of achievement and external measures of achievement. How will you measure progress and success in relation to your project? What markers of external success are important to you? I think it's important to name these also so that you can begin to unpack them and begin to consider whether the markers of external success are fully aligned, for example, with your community-related goals, and it can be a helpful starting point or on-ramp for thinking about whether the choices that you're making are aligned with all of the different all of your different intentions. It can be really easy for us to beat ourselves up because we're not achieving, X, Y, or Z goal that we think that we have. I want, my book to be on bookshelves at the airport, for example, when that might actually be totally misaligned with the community goal of making books that you can turn around urgently and use to connect with your neighbors. I would also say that I would encourage everyone to be open to unexpected paths. And I think we've heard this from many of our speakers this weekend. Once you've clearly defined your goals, you may realize that the pathway that you thought was going to lead you to your goal is actually not the right path at all. Like it's leading you toward a totally different goal that isn't even important to you, or you thought it was a priority, but you realize that it actually has to be a secondary or tertiary priority, or maybe it's not so important. So continuing to check in with yourself and follow your instincts is so meaningful. And I included here this sort of extended quotation. This is literary specific, but I think it can be helpful. This is from a science fiction author, Naomi Kanakia, who also publishes a newsletter. And Naomi wrote, sometimes people ask me, why don't you send these stories to journals? But I do submit to journals. I've published over 60 stories in various journals. I've been in several best of anthologies, including the 2022 and 2023 volumes of Best Small Fictions. But when you publish a short story in a literary journal, absolutely nothing happens. You get no response whatsoever. There's no evidence that anyone other than the editor actually enjoyed reading the story. The hope with these journals is that you'll accumulate enough credits that you can eventually convince a publisher to put out a story collection, and then maybe somebody will read that collection. But people spend 10 or 15 years of their life working to convince someone to publish their collection. And then what happens? Most of those collections get maybe 1,000 readers. So instead, I took a risk and I started posting them online. And over 9 months, I built a readership that at this point far exceeds the readership of the Kenyon Review or Missouri Review or any of those journals I'd once aspired to appear within. And I share this just to offer a little bit of context. Again, we had a conversation earlier today about how scary it can be to hear from so many different people in so many different positions of power, so many different gatekeepers who are describing the complexity of passing through those gates in order for your work to potentially reach the mass audience, for example, that you might have thought that you wanted. But actually, as you check in with yourself, check in with your goals, you may realize that actually the best way, if your goal is to reach 5,000 people with your story, the most effective way to do that may not be to try to publish it with a lit mag where there are really only a few in the entire country, for example, that reach more than 5,000 readers. And you may actually have more if your goal is to be a part of an exchange, a kind of creative exchange and community. You may have more success doing that on your own terms. This is not to say don't publish in literary magazines or don't pursue traditional methods of exhibition presentation. It's just a reminder to be open to the fact that the pathways that lead us toward our goals may be different than the ones that we expected or assumed, and to remind us how much power we have to identify exactly the resources we need in order to achieve the specific intentions we have. I think it can be helpful at the beginning of the process of reassessing or returning to a big project to consider that I like to begin with the premise that whatever that big thing is that you want to do, you already want to do it, right? You've already been wanting to do it. That's what's leading you to return to it, take this moment, reflect, think about it. So you've been wanting to do it. What has been stopping you? This is the question. And I think one suggestion I have is to list every single thing. And it can be, your cramped morning routine, your broken computer, your need for professional help. Now that you've gone as far as you can with your project, you may know exactly what you need. You may not know what you need, but you know what's holding you back. The first step is naming what's holding you back, and from there you can begin to work through those solutions step by step. Earlier in my introduction of Mindy Sue, I mentioned that Mindy is, if someone at the beginning, I remember when she was preparing to publish that book, and she was beginning to describe. Actually, I remember meeting her when she interviewed for this position at Rutgers, and her presentation of materials was unlike anyone I had ever seen. Instead of having like a totally traditional CV, her CV lives online in a spreadsheet. That way, she only ever has to update things in one place, and anyone can see anything that she has created all of the time, any of the time. It's a totally different way of thinking about intellectual property, but it also is a solution to such a wide range of technical challenges that many of us face. similarly, when Mindy was preparing to publish Cyberfeminism Index, she said, "Oh, I have a few months off, and I'm planning on doing some public programs." Well, if she had said, "I'm planning to do 80 programs in 15 countries," I would have thought that sounds impossible. Like, how in the world will you do that? How will you fund that? How will you build those networks? But when breaking such a big and ambitious project down to little baby steps, it becomes a lot easier. You think, how in the world am I going to write this, 120,000 word novel? But when you think, oh, I just need to write 500 words a day, and a year later I will have that novel, it feels a whole lot more accessible. So, my suggestion is to begin by thinking about, by identifying what's already been preventing you from doing this thing that you have already been wanting to do, and approach the solution making from a position of empowerment. I'm gonna just talk about some of the specific types of challenges that you might be facing, and share a few resources for like specific solutions. So the first one, this slide just has to do with space making. One of the great things about writing is that we usually are able to do it wherever we are, but a lot of us are also working on book projects that are not necessarily writing based, or that may require resources beyond simply writing. And so a few resources, we included a link to a really helpful roundup of 1 week writing residencies and 2 week writing residencies for those of us who work full time or aren't able to take a lot of time away, but are still interested in a change of pace and the community building that a writing residency can offer. I next listed a few resources that are helpful for those who need facilities specific to making artist books. And of course, there'll be many other facilities in the communities and locations where you are. These are just a few that I wanted to highlight that I think can be helpful. Women's Studio Workshop has residencies and also subsidies for producing artist books. They release open calls to apply for those subsidies periodically. Center for Book Arts is in New York City, and they have workshops and classes, as well as resources associated with bookmaking specifically. The Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop is also in New York City and offers fellowships for artists of color who are interested in integrating printmaking into a larger practice, including bookmaking and other printmaking related practices. There's a long list of writing residencies from Bomb magazine that I also shared. And then finally, the Artist Communities Alliance is the national membership organization for artist communities. So for all residencies, most residencies in this country. And they have a really helpful website where you can easily filter by very specific parameters, like I need to be able to bring my family, and identify all of the available residencies in the country that meet those parameters. So that might be a helpful resource for those of you who enjoy residencies. A residency isn't required. It's like not helpful for everyone. I have those of you who subscribe to our newsletter know that Quincy and I both have a really love-hate relationship with space-related artist residencies, but it is hard to substitute for the community that you can build really intensively and in a short period of time by connecting with other people through those kinds of programs. Another challenge that you might be facing may have to do with generating material. Sometimes people are like, I have a really good idea, but I can't figure out how to get the words on the page. For some of you, I know there are folks in this community who find morning pages really helpful. Classically, in The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron's book, morning pages is just 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing. Some people find that to be really expansive. Other people hate it. And there's been a lot of writing and reflection about the way that for some people, especially those of us who are neurodivergent or who are living with depression, that you may find that morning pages actually do more harm than good, or that they give space and a name. They create a space for you to articulate a lot of things that don't actually need to be on the page. That may be you. That's fine. I included a link to or an image of from the graphic novelist Linda Berry, who's written about the way that morning pages don't really work for her, because they create either an obituary-like recounting of events or a hamster wheel of feelings of worry and dissatisfaction and complaints. This is if morning pages are great for you, then and if you haven't ever tried morning pages, I certainly recommend consider giving it a try and seeing if it does work. But if it doesn't work, that's also totally or ordinary. And I think I'll say that for me, when I first began writing more seriously as an adult, I thought that I could only write in the morning, and I had this weird. I never even it never even occurred to me to interrogate the idea that the morning was the most generative time, like the only time that my brain was empty. I could go straight from the dream state or something like that. Well, morning did happen to be a pretty productive time for me, although not necessarily writing morning pages. I have other strategies that I use. But it turns out I took a class, like a generative writing class that was in the evening, and it turned out I produced some of the best work because I was like subconsciously kind of processing everything that I had done throughout the day. And that may be you too. So if you're having trouble generating material, sometimes challenging whatever built-in assumptions you have about the way that you yourself work can be helpful. Maybe you've always thought that you worked in a particular way. Maybe you did used to work in a particular way, and maybe now you can work differently. So just a suggestion, creating time to observe, daydream, do nothing. For those of you who, like me, are kind of workaholics, it can be really important to try to make time to empty your mind and allow the world to come in. But it can be, for many, it can be the most creative time. So I remember when I worked, I had the opportunity to work with an artist strategic planner, Beth Pickens, a few years ago. And one of the very first questions that she asked, I bet there are others who have worked with her who are here, by the way. But one of the very first questions she asked was for me to do a kind of audit of my time and how I spend my time throughout the week and how much time do I spend doing nothing. And the very first task was to create more time to do nothing. And I realized that even the time that I thought that I was spending doing nothing was like sneakily time that I was also doing something, like I was working out or I was reading or I was doing something that was like actually productive. And so figuring out a way to force myself to slow down was really difficult, but really important. Generative writing prompts, if you're a writer or thinking about writing and haven't used writing prompts, for some people, they can be really helpful. Other writers dislike them intensely. I personally find writing prompts to be super generative, but I especially enjoy being guided personally through the prompts. So this is one reason why I'm part of a writing group that is mostly writing prompt focused, because it's very hard for me to muster up the energy to do them on my own, but I loved a workshop. I love a reader. I love being read to. I love being guided through a prompt. Some resources that we've used at Lewis Place to collect writing prompts for others include Woodland Pattern and Poets and Writers. That said, there's so many genre-specific newsletters and resources that publish prompts, and we have a prompt library, but also there are lots of places for you to find the kind of prompts that are most successful for you. I would also say that some of the craft books that we're going to mention in the next slide have really great sort of on-ramps for writers. Maybe not the next slide, but one of the next slides. If you're feeling stuck, another tool for generating material, and this is true, although what's listed here are mostly writing related resources. I find this true outside of writing specifically. But so one option is to consider taking a class. And for me, I found that I'm like a lifelong learner. I love a class. It's the same as loving being read to. I love being guided or coached in any context. I find it such a luxury and such a pleasure. And I also really enjoy taking classes that are writing related. And but also, so what I'm saying is like I take dance class and I like, I'm always like, I want to learn this new thing and I need to take a class. That's the best way to learn it. But I love learning with other people and from people who love learning too. So some writing class suggestions, and y'all probably have more ideas and you can throw them in the chat. I think Center for Fiction has great writing classes. Writing Collab has great writing classes. If you ever took writing classes from Catapult in the past, which like totally dissolved when the billionaire founder decided that she was no longer going to support writing community. Many of those people went on to work with Writing Collab, which is an incredible collaborative or like cooperative group of writers who offer classes. The Shipman Agency is actually like speaking agency for writers and it's like a little fancy, but many of the incredible writers that work with them also lead classes, both one-off workshops and multi-week classes, as well as year-long classes. The Poetry Project has a set of classes and ongoing teaching learning program called Discourse that is really great and often combines theory and practice. Wendy's Subway, so Rachel Valinsky, who spoke yesterday, as a co-founder and artistic director of Wendy's Subway, they have really great classes that also tend to have a kind of theory practice connection. I also, incidentally, for those of you who are in or if you're passing through Bushwick, Brooklyn, I really recommend visiting the Wendy's Subway Reading Room, which is pretty incredible and is open several days, maybe 4 days a week. The Los Angeles Review of Books has virtual writing classes. One of the writers in one of my groups, Trajectories, is teaching a class, memoir related class there right now. Blue Stoop Philadelphia has great classes. Story Studio Chicago, I took a class I really loved through Story Studio Chicago with a writer whose work I was very familiar with already. It was super cool. I think Quincy also took a class with Story Studio. Sackett Street Writers is a New York City-based organization that also has virtual classes, and I really enjoyed the classes I've taken with them. There are writers everywhere offering classes and lots of ways of plugging in. I think of all learning as horizontal learning. You're like never too far along to learn alongside someone else or to be shaken up by someone else. I listened to a really great podcast interview with Bernadine Evaristo, the Booker-winning poet, author of Girl, Woman, Other, and she talked about how she was totally stuck on that book, and then she went and took a class, and the class involved a writing prompt that, while the prompt itself sort of frustrated her, it helped her, it totally kickstarted her project. This is from the podcast that is called Craft, which is a great podcast. Consider your tools, hardware. Oh, wow, it's 5:21. Okay, I'm going to go a little faster. Consider your tools. You may find that there are hardware, software tools that are supportive for your work. And you may find that changing your software, changing the tools helps to kind of kickstart your work or shift the way that you're working. For example, I know that Quincy uses Scrivener, and moving everything from Microsoft Word to Scrivener makes it possible to revise in a really different way, and also to see the manuscript at a glance in a really different way. Similarly, you may find that retyping your manuscript in another format might be helpful. I use Ulysses, which I like because it works in the cloud and on the fly. Consider joining a writing community for workshop or feedback, and consider ways that you can build community and feedback into your practice. I'm not going to go through these since they're listed in the slides, but a few favorite craft books that have been that we or those in our community have found helpful. Some of the writing resources, like the websites that I go to a lot, the newsletters I subscribe to, and that get mentioned a lot in the community, are listed here and are linked in the slides. And then some places where you might look for opportunities beyond what I've already listed. So places to look for opportunities to submit to lit mags, to look for fellowships and other like time-sensitive opportunities, open calls, things like that. And then finally, a few contexts through which you might be able to find mentorship or professional help. I listed a few people who are part of our community or part of our network, who offer coaching or who offer writing related, like editing services or writing related support. And then I also listed on the right some organizations that folks in our community have found helpful. For New York Foundation for the Arts, those are virtual, and they do have free sessions for different like groups of artists. And so definitely recommend looking at those along with the other resources that are listed there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop because I'm pulling a Camila. I'm talking really fast, and you have you have all of the resources available in the slides, so there's no need for me to read them all to you. But thank you. Thank you so much for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, the chat. Oh my God, Notion, of course, always, forever.
Yeah, thanks for, yeah, sorry. It's really hard for me to not, I keep forgetting that this is recorded, and it's really hard for me to not just go right into the gossip all the time, but um, I keep writing notes to Naima, like, when we edit the videos, you have to take this out. You have to take this out. Um, but yes, the School for Poetic Computation is an incredible resource. Yes, to writing night at Wendy's Subway. Yes, CA Conrad's writing workshops. I've heard incredible things. Emily Brandt. Yes. Yes, we're a little bit. I'm not even going to start on Notion. We do everything in Notion. We're obsessed with that. Um, yeah. Does anybody have any other questions? Pros and cons of writing residencies. What do you mean site specific? I mean, I guess, yeah. And while we wait, Quincy, do you maybe want to say a little bit about pros and cons of writing residencies?
Well, I think it depends on the specific one. And what you are are looking to get out of them. I will just say that without fail, and I forget every time that I always get excited about applying for them, getting them, heading to them. That the main thing on my mind is what I received is a a 3 week, a 3 month, or whatever, a package of a bubble of writing. Like I'm gonna like go in a room. I got like to just tear myself away from my, normal day-to-day life and kind of be, in a room writing. And I will also say I've never been to the ones where they like bring your lunch and they keep you in your room and you actually get to do that. I have been to ones where, there's like chef prepared meals, but you come together to eat them. And then I've been to things that didn't provide food at all. But all of them, every 100% of them, um, and it's a slap in my face that I forgot that they're all like that, where I have to recalibrate my expectations that this is more of a building community situation. That every residency I've ever been to, what I've gotten more out of it is meeting the people who also were there, and the sharing and the kind of cross-pollination, especially when they're different disciplines. It's very hard, and to be clear, these residencies were set up where I could close myself in a room and not have to do any of that. But it was like, why would I be here for 3 months with these amazing people and not, hang out with them, and get to know them and like really, yeah, it's just like, um, yeah, it really, I think the pros are the people who are also there. The cons is that, yeah, that I always forget that the residency makes this promise, and maybe people, it's there to pull off in that way, but I think the promise never works for me because I'm really more interested in taking advantage of this opportunity. I spend my life like in my room at home, I don't go out anywhere at home. And so why would I get invited to be with these amazing people in person and just not take advantage of eating dinner with them and getting to know them. So yeah.
Thank you. I also want to just tie that into the ambassador's other question about dealing with validation and the question of like, what if other people in your community really value like external markers of success that might not be aligned with your priorities at the moment? Because it does feel related to residencies, and I've been thinking about it ever since it was mentioned in yesterday's workshop about traditional literary publishing, where we were told that publishing in lit mags, for example, demonstrates like a commitment to the practice, like an ongoing kind of commitment to the practice. And one thing that I that when Erica said that, it reminded me that while while what it seems like people value is lit mags or a certain CV item, but it may also be true that what is actually valuable is building a discourse around the practice or demonstrating an ongoing or an ongoing commitment to your work and commitment to the literary community beyond simply being a hobby. And there are lots of ways to do that, and they don't necessarily involve going through a gatekeeper, if that makes sense. Um,
Um, can I comment on that too? One of the things that I would also recommend, it's to the question of actually residencies and the kind of challenge of external markers. Like, obviously, I'm here at Lewis Place. I think it's great. Everybody should join, etc. But yeah, being in shared space where the shared work is, yes, we're sharing our work, we're talking about it, we're building community around it, but also we're making space for the fact that this is a like emotionally and spiritually challenging thing to do, to be a writer together, and takes a toll on our psyches and our sense of self, and that we're sort of like in it together, has helped me to do some of the unpacking that Steffani's talking about around, like, is it about external validation that someone else is imposing, or is that also me imposing that value on my expectation of what that thing is? Do I think graduate school people value it inherently just because it's elite, or because it means that you're spending time with people in practice? I'm not saying that the validation part and the external thing and the elitism don't exist. Believe me, I'm not saying that. However, I do think that what I've found, that when I'm in the mix, in spaces where vulnerability around practice is encouraged, so that it's, we're able to just kind of like be in it together, my sense that there's this like space over there where people who are on one side of the gate know things that is like fundamentally different than me. It's not that there aren't like differences in knowledge and privilege and all that kind of stuff. It's more like even the sense of self that that person over there might have, and their anxieties, and what shapes their motivations to create or to be in the roles that they're in, or what it actually takes to be on the panels for various things, and literally how little money everyone is making except for like three people. Like, truly, it that demystifying that, being with others in that, it makes me feel more like my peers are a peerage, and like the problem is capitalism, right? As opposed to the problem is somebody else who I think has solved capitalism better than me. Um, so
yeah, thank you. I would love to say more, but I also want to respect the time of everyone who's here. And we've already exceeded our time. We've worked so hard to stay on track, and I think we've done a really good job. I'm giving us all a collective pat on the back. We have finished almost every session on time, and this is not going to be an exception. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us, for trusting us and sharing this time with us. It's been so incredible. I have learned so much. I reflected on so much. I feel totally transformed in my relationship to publishing, and really inspired and challenged in a lot of ways. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for your commitment to walking the walk with us and thinking it through. We will be in touch. We're going to be in touch. We have like a little survey, as I've mentioned. This project was supported by a foundation, so we're very excited to report back to them how amazing this was. So we have a little survey that we're going to share. We'll circulate that, and then we'll be in touch when the recordings are available. Some of you have inquired about that, and thank you so much for being patient. It is going to take a little bit of time. We have to process these huge, long videos, resynchronize the captions, review them with the speakers. It's not an instantaneous process, but we are really excited to share them with you and with everyone else. So please be on the lookout for that. And yeah, just very grateful to all of you for being here with us, and so excited to see what we all make after this weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yay. Bye. Bye.